And if Tony does want to reach the 6,000 ounce goal, we need more than one plant going, because this is the latest we've ever gone in my 20-ish years of working here to start sluicing.
Monica Beets gave up her gold claim after working harder than anyone and never got the credit. She didn't leave because she was weak. She left because the work was too heavy and no one said thank you. She helped build the mine, but after having her baby, she saw what really mattered. Tune in, because when she walked away, even her father, Tony Beets, started making big mistakes. The weight of gold is measured in silence. Monica Beets was never just the daughter of a mining titan. In the frozen wilderness of the Klondike, where days stretch into nights, and every creak of the permafrost sounds like a challenge, she was the calm in a storm that never ended. At 12 years old, she was handed the controls of a front-end loader with no instructions, no guidance, and no one watching. There were no second chances. Only forward, only work, only results. That was her childhood. That was the expectation. And that moment didn't break her. It defined her. But what she found beneath the ice changed everything.
We've got a hole in our top screen.
How bad is it?
I've got 2 runs blocked off.
From that day on, Monica grew alongside the goldfields. She didn't learn by reading manuals or shadowing someone else. She learned because there was no other choice. When equipment jammed, she unjammed it. When crews hesitated, she directed them. While her brothers took to their roles with confidence and support, Monica had to earn her authority on ground that rarely respected softness or silence. The land didn't make room for her. She carved it open with precision.
It's nice to be sluicing because we're actually making steps towards this 6,000 ounce goal versus just doing nothing.
She didn't need to prove she could belong. She became the reason others did. She led crews twice her age, managed daily operations at Paradise Hill, and earned a reputation not just for competence, but for command. Every washed ounce of gold passed through systems she maintained. Every decision that saved time or salvaged equipment carried her fingerprint. But for every success, she carried a promise deferred, the claim she was told she'd get. Tony Beets was a force of nature, hard, relentless, and fiercely proud. He always hinted Monica would one day have her own land to run, a stretch of dirt she could command without asking. And every season, that promise stayed just out of reach. She never complained. She didn't have time. She threw herself into the work like someone trying to outrun disappointment. Eventually, the Hester cut arrived. 3 acres of untouched potential, locked in ice and heavy with unspoken expectations.
It's leaking through the dike already. Look at it. It starts with a trickle, but it don't take very long. And you'd have a river going. I'm glad they got here on time.
Tony believed the land held treasure the old dredgers had missed. For Monica, it represented something even rarer. Her name finally attached to something her father hadn't touched first. She poured herself into the claim with everything she had. Every hydraulic hose, every chain, every stubborn yard of pay dirt became personal. But the Yukon doesn't care about personal matters. The setbacks arrived like storms. Equipment failed. Road access collapsed. The weather turned against her and stayed there. And still, she showed up. The paperwork didn't reflect her ownership. The credits rarely mentioned her efforts. But the progress, that belonged to her.
My plant is got almost 1,000 ounces out of just my plant, which is...
She fixed breakdowns in the freezing dark. She directed crews who questioned her authority. She worked through exhaustion while others rested. Not for money, not for praise, but because it was hers, or at least she thought it was. Until it started to feel like no matter how hard she worked, the land would never be hers to claim. But the Yukon wasn't done testing her loyalty yet. One day, her spot on site was empty. No announcements, no send-offs. Just the dull hum of machinery filling a space where her voice used to steady the noise.
Great. Evan, do you copy Evan?
All the rocks, bigger ones, are falling down onto our little screens, which are going to put a hole in our little screens, and then we have a big front.
Monica was gone, and the absence hit harder than any equipment failure. No one filled her role. No one replaced her quiet command. The operation continued, but something fundamental shifted. What viewers didn't see was what the long days cost her. She worked through sickness. She led while others doubted her. She carried family tensions while directing complex million-dollar operations. And she did it while being expected to smile, perform, and stay quiet. When she needed rest, there was no pause button. When she needed support, there were only expectations. The Yukon doesn't reward emotional honesty, it rewards results. In 2018, Monica married Taylor Miles, a quiet moment away from cameras. In 2021, she gave birth to their daughter. That single event changed everything. For someone who had lived her entire life managing explosions, floods, injuries, and failure, holding a child introduced a silence she had never known. Not the silence of absence, the silence of peace. Toronto became a different kind of gold. It didn't gleam. It didn't get measured by weight or purity. It offered time, air, space, and Monica, for the first time in years, could breathe without fear of missing a target. She wasn't just stepping away from the Yukon, she was stepping toward herself. But what finally changed her wasn't land, legacy, or gold. It was something far smaller and far more powerful. Even Tony, who rarely acknowledged the emotional side of anything, felt the absence. He didn't say it, but others saw it in the way he stared at maps longer than usual, and how often he asked about numbers Monica used to manage instinctively. Something had shifted, and no one could quite replicate what she brought. She left, and that changed more than anyone expected. The empire that forgot its heart. The Beets name carried weight in the Yukon, not just in gold ounces or land deeds, but in the kind of reputation that made men pause before they spoke. Tony Beets, the patriarch, had transformed a modest mining operation into a full-fledged empire, built on equal parts intimidation and obsession. His voice echoed through walkie-talkies like gospel. His presence loomed across Paradise Hill like an excavator in full throttle. But behind the legend, behind the growl and bravado, was a machine too big for any one person to steer. And for years it had relied on Monica to keep it from tipping over. While Tony's charisma shaped the myth, it was Monica who shaped the system. Her touch wasn't theatrical, it was tactical. She rebalanced the entire operation from behind clipboards, grease guns, and maps no one else bothered to read. Her decisions saved time. Her instincts saved money. Her presence saved morale. And yet the machine treated her like a spare part, useful but replaceable. As the family business expanded, so did its cracks. Paradise Hill was no longer just a claim. It was an ecosystem built on pressure, television schedules, and impossible expectations. Cameras caught the sparks and the shouting, but not the tension behind Monica's eyes when another hydraulic system failed mid-shift. They didn't film the paperwork she completed late at night, or the moment she realized that even though she was managing a growing empire.
Hey, Monica, what do you got? You down?
Yeah, the tailings conveyor decided it was going to smoke.
Yeah, so did you guys figure out what was wrong with it?
Guessing it's a pulley.
She still wasn't seen as one of its architects. There was never a formal boardroom, no defined leadership roles, no job titles with clarity. Everything blurred into family dynamics and the hierarchy of who yelled loudest. Monica didn't yell, she acted, and in a world dominated by big voices and bigger egos, that often meant being overlooked. When the Hester cut was handed to her, it felt like a door finally creaked open. Not all the way, but just enough to let her in. For the first time, the claim had her fingerprints on the plan from the start. She scouted the terrain, mapped the drainage, and coordinated equipment schedules. It was never ceremonial. It was real hard work. She thought the land might give her the recognition the operation never had. But nature isn't sentimental. It doesn't reward good intentions. Storms rolled in early that season. The ground didn't thaw the way it should have. The excavators broke down at the worst possible moments. The road in and out of the cut turned to soup. Monica pushed through every setback, every missed target, every failed part. When the pay dirt finally began to flow, the weight of her accomplishment sat heavy in her chest. Not because she wanted credit, but because no one offered it. Discovery Channel sold the Beets family as a spectacle. Tony as the wild king, the boys as his loyal heirs. Monica didn't fit the formula. She wasn't loud enough. She didn't throw things. She didn't curse at machines when they failed. She just fixed them. So while her father grew more famous and the show's ratings climbed, she became a quiet fixture on the edges of the frame. By the time she married Taylor Miles, Monica was already stretched thin. Planning a wedding in the middle of mining season meant juggling equipment orders, fuel deliveries, and family tensions all at once. Still, she made space for joy. She smiled for photographs. She stepped into a new life while still carrying the burdens of the old one. But even as she stood at the altar, her mind was partially in the Yukon. That's what years of survival conditioning do. They divide your peace. When her daughter was born 3 years later, something shifted. Not dramatically, not publicly, but deep within. For the first time in her life, Monica felt a kind of responsibility that wasn't connected to output or profit. It wasn't about ounces or forecasts or machine uptime. It was about presence, about being there, about staying. The Yukon doesn't allow stillness. It demands motion. But Toronto, far from the roar of engines and the cold metallic air, offered stillness and abundance. Holding her daughter in the soft light of a quiet morning changed Monica's internal equation. Suddenly, the math of mining didn't add up anymore. What once felt like pride now felt like debt.
5,000 ounces on Paradise Hill is quite a bit of gold. I mean, it's quite simple. More dirt, more sluicing, more gold.
Meanwhile, Paradise Hill adapted. Slowly, clumsily, the crew redistributed tasks. Tony filled gaps with muscle and volume. Kevin leaned into mechanics harder than ever, but the coordination suffered. The smooth transitions Monica used to orchestrate became clunky. Maintenance delays piled up. Deadlines slipped. Not catastrophically, but noticeably. The kind of inefficiencies that build tension without a clear source. The show kept filming. The empire kept growing. But the soul of the operation felt lighter. And not in a good way. Inside the Beets family, no one said much. That was their way. But the questions hung in the air. Would she come back? Could she be convinced? Had something broken that couldn't be fixed? They didn't ask directly. They didn't admit they needed her. But the absence made itself known in the way Tony hesitated longer over site maps, or how Kevin started asking questions Monica used to answer without being asked. Even viewers noticed. Online forums buzzed with speculation. Where was Monica? Why wasn't she in the latest episode? Fans missed her, not for drama, but for balance, for competence, for the energy she brought that grounded the whole operation.
He's gonna pop some holes into the steel, bolt the steel and the rubber down to this plate.
Back in Toronto, Monica didn't speak publicly. No statements, no declarations, just space, just life, raising a child, rebuilding herself, remembering what it felt like to sleep without listening to machines in the distance. No frostbite, no dawn alarms. Just mornings that unfolded slowly. Still, the weight of legacy is hard to discard. Paradise Hill was in her blood. The machines, the terrain, the rhythm, they lived in her. Some nights, the silence in her new life was interrupted by memories of the old one. No regrets, just echoes. Her departure wasn't rebellion, it was self-preservation. Things didn't fall apart, but they didn't work the same. When silence speaks louder than gold, Monica Beets didn't leave the Yukon in protest. She didn't storm out, slam doors, or demand explanations. She simply stepped back. The way mountains disappear behind clouds, or the way winter slips into spring without warning. One day she was there, directing crews, oiling machinery, solving problems before anyone else saw them. The next day she wasn't. No big statement, no announcement. Just a pause in the system, and it echoed through the empire like a cracked gear no one could replace. To the outside world, she was still the daughter of Tony Beets, a supporting character in a dynasty where the father called the shots, the brothers manned the rigs, and Monica filled whatever space was left. But that was never the truth. The truth was simpler and far more uncomfortable. She was the foundation. Not loud, not flashy, but vital. Her withdrawal didn't break the Beets operation, but it unbalanced everything. The Yukon doesn't do grace. It doesn't reward silence or sacrifice. It tests loyalty in the coldest ways possible. Those who survive do so with grit, timing, and stubbornness. Monica had all three, but grit doesn't protect you from burnout. Stubbornness doesn't warm you when you're alone in a trailer at midnight, waiting for parts that won't arrive for 3 more days. And timing means little when promises are made with no intention of being kept. Her departure wasn't dramatic, but its impact was, like removing a bearing from a machine still running full speed.
That was just a Band-Aid, but hopefully it lasts. At least we can start up now. And hopefully it works.
The system stuttered. The energy shifted. What once felt smooth and confident began to feel brittle, and no one seemed to have the tools to put it right. Tony didn't talk about it. He kept moving, kept planning. But those who knew him best saw the signs. He shouted more but hesitated longer. He demanded results but trusted less. It was as if something had been broken, some inner gear knocked out of alignment. His daughter had been his right hand for over a decade, and now she was gone. Not because she didn't love the work, but because love alone doesn't sustain you forever. The fans noticed too. In episode recaps and forum threads, her absence became more than a footnote. Viewers described the shift in tone, the missing spark, not drama, not excitement, but balance. The woman who had quietly kept the wheels turning was no longer there to correct course, and the show felt colder for it. And what came next would reveal just how much the Empire had depended on her silence. Yet in Toronto, Monica wasn't trying to make a point. She wasn't watching the episodes or reading comments. She was raising a child. She was rebuilding her sense of self. She was learning what it meant to exist without pressure measured in ounces. There were no forecasts to meet, no crews to rally, no ground to thaw. For the first time in her life, her time was her own. But the past doesn't disappear. It lingers, in scars, in memories. In the quiet moments after a long day when your body still hears the sound of excavators and your mind still scans for safety risks. Paradise Hill had been home, but it had also been the furnace where she was forged. And sometimes the fire that shapes you is the same one that burns you hollow. People around her didn't understand the depth of that fracture. To them, stepping away from a multi-million-dollar legacy must have seemed unthinkable. But gold has always come with ghosts. Every ounce dug from the ground carries the weight of choices made, time lost, and sacrifices forgotten. Monica understood that better than anyone. She didn't just live the mining life. She absorbed it. She carried the tension of being a woman in a male-dominated world where competence was always second-guessed. She bore the unspoken pressure of representing her family, the crew, the show, and herself, all without letting anything crack. Her shoulders weren't just carrying tools. They carried legacy, and it became too heavy. Even as she built a new life, the call of the North lingered. Not a siren song, but a pulse. Something quieter, deeper. A part of her still tethered to the dirt roads, the ice-choked creeks, and the machines she once commanded, like extensions of her own body. She hadn't turned her back on it. She had simply learned that being needed wasn't the same as being valued.
Getting rid of all this overburden is going to get us running this dirt quicker, and as soon as we can start running this dirt, the sooner we can actually start making money here.
Back at Paradise Hill, the daily grind continued. New workers came and went, machines broke and were repaired, pay dirt was hauled, processed, and weighed. The system functioned, but not the same. Coordination slipped, morale wavered. Kevin did his best to cover gaps. Tony threw himself deeper into operations, but the rhythm was fractured. The machine turned, but it clanked instead of purred. Inside the Beets family, the silence stretched. There were no apologies, no requests, no official attempts to bring her back. Just quiet, a space left unfilled. Whether it was pride, fear, or the Beets' way of never naming pain, no one said what they all knew. Monica had been essential, and now they were struggling without her. Fans hoped for a return. Speculation fueled headlines. But Monica stayed quiet. Not out of spite, but peace. For the first time, she wasn't responsible for the next fire, the next fix, the next shift rotation. Her identity had been so bound to the family operation that stepping away felt like amputating a part of herself. But as the months passed, that space began to heal. Still, the legacy tugged. Her daughter would grow up knowing that her mother had shaped a piece of the Yukon, that her name wasn't just a line in a credits reel, but a keystone in one of the most iconic mining operations in North America. And one day, that child might ask why her mother walked away. If she returns, it will be on her terms. Not as a supporting character, not as the reliable extra set of hands, but as a leader, an equal, someone whose value no longer has to be explained. And if she doesn't return, that too will be a statement, one made not in protest, but in clarity. Some of it is standing, breathing, walking away. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is leave behind what once defined them, not because it wasn't real, but because it no longer fits. Monica Beets didn't step down. She stepped up, into herself, into a version of life that didn't require her to sacrifice everything just to stay in the room. She walked away from gold, but did the empire ever deserve her in the first place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more.